Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bitcoin Business Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to the intersection of Bitcoin and business. We want to help educate entrepreneurs, business owners, CFOs, and leaders in general on the power of Bitcoin and what it means for corporations and their financial strategies and everything in between. And in the show, we want to talk about the people that know what is going on, the leaders in this industry. We want to talk to people that are actually adopting Bitcoin and learn from them. And today, I have a very special guest. Brandon Karpeles has just become the new CEO of Sovereign, and I'm extremely excited to talk to him today. So please say hello, Brandon.
Thanks, Daniel. Super excited to be running this outfit that you've put so much time and effort into, and a lot of people have spent building the foundation here. It's incredible just getting up to speed on everything that's been built and laid the groundwork for exactly what you said. Hopefully, being able to connect with businesses and people in authority that in these businesses that are able to make financial decisions for the company, really being able to, one, educate them about the need for Bitcoin, why they are falling behind, why it seems
Hmm.
so hard to just continue to run a profitable operation, and then ultimately provide a team of people to give them solutions and options for excuse me, they're a company to implement Bitcoin into the actual business
Yeah.
and be able to have it as a financial tool and a better unit of account and money for the company.
Well, that was very well said. I think it's very important for people to understand that what we're trying to do is really twofold. The first is the education. It's so important because Bitcoin is a paradigm shift similar to computers, the internet, electricity itself, social media, whatever you want to compare it to. And first and foremost, which is the goal with this podcast, is to educate leaders on how to take advantage of this and how to understand it because Bitcoin is not only changing the world, it's changing the world of business, and you have to understand what's going on. It's not a question of whether you want to kind of jump on board with it, you have to understand it. And once we've hopefully gotten people up to speed on what's going on, the second part of the firm is about offering professional services to actually have people take advantage of it because it's also very complicated, it's very new, and having a team of people there to help you is certainly something that we think is valuable. So we'll see. Brandon, I would absolutely love, and I think a lot of people would love to hear your story as much as you're comfortable sharing where you kind of came from and how you ended up in this situation and why you care about Bitcoin and I guess as well.
Yeah, so I came from the banking world, which seems to be a common theme amongst a lot of Bitcoiners these days is working in or around money, the traditional financial space or whatever, and
Yeah.
sort of figuring this out just because of our background and understanding and having to deal with money and the monetary system, and
Mhm.
specifically in banking, the Federal Reserve System is front and center of your life and the regulators and everything else. So you have kind of a first step into learning about money, which to me is the
Right.
first step of learning about Bitcoin. And I had a unique role within the industry. I wasn't sort of a traditional lender or a wealth management person or anything like that. I
Okay.
actually, back in 2008, was tapped to go help deal with all of the distressed assets that were piling up
Hmm.
on the organization that I worked for's balance sheet as a result of the great financial crisis. And it was drinking water from a fire hose back then, and they were just grabbing anybody that they could to help deal with this stuff. And that's when all this tarp stuff started coming out, and I just got a firsthand look at the devastation that was caused by this economic recession that we were going into, all the money that was printed to bail out the financial institutions and not borrowers specifically, and started asking a lot of questions as to how could this be the system that we're kind of operating in? How does it work like this? And started learning a lot more. Along the way, I continued to deal with distressed businesses, distressed companies, and about a decade ago, really went in full time to dealing only with businesses. In the past, I had dealt with businesses, I had
Mm,
dealt with real estate, I had dealt with homes. You name an asset class, I had something to do with it.
interesting.
In terms of trying to recover funds for my employer. And like I said, about a decade ago, I really got into the weeds with these businesses, a more traditional sort of uh, C&I, we called it, commercial and industrial companies that made things, companies that provided services, that had accounts
Mm,
receivable, that had accounts payable, that were running businesses that 99 times out of 100 were started by an entrepreneur, by some family member currently or previously, and it was potentially second generation or third generation, or is being run by a small team of people most of the time who were part of the founding of the business. And I was able to see firsthand in these distress situations when it got to us that almost all the time it had something to do with management.
hmm,
And it wasn't that management was totally incompetent or they were idiots. It was they didn't understand the fundamental problem of their profitability being eroded by inflation. That
hmm.
on paper, they were potentially making money. A lot of times they were just straight up losing money. They were just a highly unprofitable business, and that
Okay,
was a different problem and
sure.
situation. But a lot of times it was like, hey, we have some money, but not enough money, and we can't service the debt. And oh, if we just got rid of our debt, we would be a profitable company. And it's like, well, but you've been taking on the debt because you are unable to keep up with inflation. You're unable to manage
Mm, yes.
your product cycle to match the debasement of your money. And not only that, it should be going the other way. You should be able to generate any sort of profit, any sort of return, and that money should be able to stay on your balance sheet and should be able to provide future capital opportunities. And instead, it was destroying future capital
Hmm.
opportunities. And then you had to go figure out, where do I put this money so that it doesn't lose value? And I just had a firsthand view of a lot of these companies dealing with that problem, dealing with these issues. And I would get into the weeds with these companies, with third parties, um, trying to figure out solutions to help run these businesses to get them back to a profitability point where they
Okay.
could start functioning again. And that is sort of a unique background for a lot of people that come from the space, but I am hoping that these skills can translate over and be useful here as we get off the ground and launch this thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that background. I think that is absolutely fascinating because I don't think as Bitcoiners, whatever that even means, we come from all walks of life. And having been in your situation, you've really seen firsthand the destruction of capital and just human misery in general caused by this fiat system that we live in. So I think that would probably be a great segue into why you got into Bitcoin, why you think that is interesting, and perhaps why that could be a solution to everything you've just talked about.
Yeah, I got into Bitcoin. As I was mentioning, I was starting to ask some questions with
Hmm.
the TARP and the bailouts and going, oh, what is this monetary system? Now,
Yeah.
800 bill, and people, they just said, oh, they bailed out the banks, 800 billion. Well, where do we get that?
Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't from Treasury. There's nothing there. Oh, they bought back all these mortgage-backed securities and these commercial mortgage-backed securities. Well, how did they do that? Well, and that kind of started my questioning is what really is this entire system? And
Mm.
at the time, I started to understand that they're just making more monetary units. I had talked to my financial advisor at the time. Um, Now my financial advisor is a Bitcoin exchange and wallet. So uh,
Love it.
about potentially buying some gold, and he actually let me know. He said, "Well, make sure you don't buy paper gold. Make sure you get the actual physical gold." And I
Okay.
said, "Well, what's the difference?" So that
Yeah.
started me down another little learning journey as to why you hold physical instead of paper. It's just a name, it's not the actual asset. And and then it took another 6 to 8 years before I circled back. Really anything on that front. I kind of just dealt with the pain of inflation and not really fully understanding the monetary
Mm.
system, but just having some questions. And I was actually I used to play a bit of online poker as sort of a
Mm.
semi-professional additional supplement to my income, and I had used the site Full Tilt at the time, which went into bankruptcy, and I lost everything that I had on that site, and
Oh.
learned another lesson: custody, and ended up actually 3 years later getting the funds back in a bankruptcy, but I was unable to cash them out because none of the banks would accept them. I have a
Hmm.
few buddies who are professional poker players, and I tried to see if I could get my funds back from them. Hey, can I just send you the money on this platform and you just give me some dollars in real life? They
Yep.
said, or I can send you back some Bitcoin. And I so what is that? What is Bitcoin? And they said, oh, it's like digital money. It's a different kind of money. And I think at the time, gosh, it was trading at like $78 or something it was some
Wow.
ridiculously low.
Right.
And they said I could just send you some of that. And I was like, nah, I want the dollars. That obviously a massive mistake. Fast
Well,
forward probably 4 years after that, that was kind of the crazy run up in 2017 into 2018.
yep.
And I go, oh yeah, that Bitcoin thing is $20,000. I remember talking about that. What is it? Bought a little bit of it, kept it on Coinbase, and didn't really know what I was doing, but had it in my Coinbase account and just kind of let it sit there. And then 2020 rolled around and we went into the lockdowns, and I immediately was like, this is a scam. They try to run a virus out on us like every 2 years. They try to scare everyone. I'm like, this will be done by I think they started talking about it in February. I'm like, ah,
Mm.
by March it'll be over. And it just kept getting crazier and and I saw people around me just getting crazier and crazier and wiping things down and covering their mouth. I'm like, this is total, guys. They do this every 2 years, and then nothing happens. And it just turned in as so from the beginning. I was like, this is total nonsense. It's a respiratory virus. What are we doing here? And I, so I was online. I didn't have an account, but I looked at Twitter and I
Mhm.
found a lot of the skeptics of the whole situation to be Bitcoin. I was
Mm.
like, why did these guys all sort of think the same? Why is there a common theme of COVID skepticism coming out of this one community? And that's really what sparked me to really start going down the rabbit hole and go, okay, I really need to understand this better because there seems to be some sort of alignment of values and beliefs here um, with mine, and it has nothing to do with actually what's going on. It's just a worldview. And that's really when I went in head first and started telling everyone about it and was, crazy Bitcoin evangelist guy to everyone I ran into for a solid 2, 3 years. As I've learned more and more and understood more and more, I just kind of looked at my life, what I was doing, how I was living, how much I was spending on just wanton nonsense and what my quote unquote goals. My goals were just work till I'm 65 and they cash in my
Mm.
401k and total fiat normie and stepping out of that just slowly more and more. I just realized like Jeff Booth, I got to a point where it's like I can't give my time to this system anymore. I have to go do something else. And I don't care what the financial repercussions are, what the life changes are. I just got to go do it because I can't do this anymore. So I apologize. That was a long winded
No,
story,
that was excellent.
but that's for today. So
That was exactly what I wanted to hear, and I think that added context is super valuable for people. And there's so many ways I could kind of take that and pull on different things. What I will say is that story or the journey that you've gone through and the inevitable point you reach where you have to dedicate your time to Bitcoin, it's something we hear over and over again at Sovereign. Pretty much everyone that's with us now has that same story. I have the same. There just comes a point where once you've sort of seen the light, it sounds almost a little bit kind of cultish or something, but I think other people that
religious.
yeah, religious, but it is really the truth because we're not just talking about money. We're not talking about cryptography or investing. We're talking about arguably one of the most important things in the world and the lifeblood of civilization. And the corruption of money has corrupted the entire world. So once you truly understand this, few things seems to be worthwhile after that point. You want to dedicate your time and energy to Bitcoin, and I have a lot of respect for people that want to do that.
And what is Bitcoin at the end of the day but a store of your energy and time?
Yeah,
And so what better thing to put your energy into than something that actually stores your energy? I mean, it's just a perfect
it is.
symbiotic. I don't even know if symbiotic's the right word because it's not really a relationship. It's just kind of the self-reinforcing
Yeah,
philosophical idea.
but I do like that expression because I think when you truly go off the deep end in Bitcoin, you might see it as a cybernetic organism. And I do believe that Bitcoin and humanity is in a symbiotic relationship. We're feeding it energy, and it is doing the service of keeping an absolute truth ledger. I think Michael Saylor, his name is probably going to come up a lot in this podcast, but he described it very well. Bitcoin is the next best thing to God coming down on earth and creating a form of money. And if he made a decree and said this is what it's going to be, like from the Bible, fair weights and measures, and he set it in stone for eternity, this is effectively what Bitcoin is. We're feeding it like a plant, and we're not watering it and giving it nitrogen, but we're giving it energy, and it's growing and surviving, and we're growing and surviving.
I had this exact conversation with my wife yesterday. And
Awesome.
by the way, I could go down the divine inspiration, divine influence, Bitcoin rabbit hole that just fascinates me to no end. I can't even wrap my head around it. It's like it's on
Yes.
par with actual creation.
Yes,
But
it is.
anyways, I was having a conversation with my wife. I was telling her a story. As I was leaving, someone came up to me and was talking to me, and they said, "Oh, you're going to work for Bitcoin, huh?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to work on Bitcoin." He was like, "The company Bitcoin, right?" And I was like, "There is no company Bitcoin, and that's part of the education we're trying to have is differentiating between all these other,
Yes, good
altcoins,
point.
cryptos, and Bitcoin, because all those altcoins, all those cryptos, all those other NFTs, they're all companies or some derivative of a
Mm,
company. Bitcoin is money." And I said, it's interesting. When I was talking to my wife, I said, I don't think I would have ever thought about it that way, but like Bitcoin, this non-living organism, it's just code, got me to come work for it. So it's
yes.
perpetuating it's and got so many other infinitely smarter than me people and talent come work for it just by perpetuating the incentives of what
Yes.
the network brings. And I was like, I don't know if I would have ever thought about it that way until that guy asked that completely ridiculous question of me. But he totally framed my viewing of the situation. Like this
That's brilliant.
orb, this organism, this software being
Yeah,
is pulling people in to come work for it to perpetuate its
it's
existence.
calling
It's
people.
a
Yeah.
unique concept.
Wow, I absolutely love that. I mean, we could definitely spin up a Bitcoin philosophy podcast. Maybe we'll
Yeah,
have
I know.
to, we'll have to look into that. Man, what you got me thinking on is Bitcoin is not a zero sum game. I think that is something that really struck a chord with me a while ago when I realized this because we're so used to being winners and losers in this world. Even just the very idea of money in general, you make money, we all know intuitively, regardless of how financially literate we are, that you can't just put that money aside. You can't just put it under the mattress or put it in the bank account because literally the fact of you just existing, someone somewhere is continually expanding the money supply, raising the denominator and making your existing stockpile of money worth less. And if you talk about crypto, well, we're in competition with that crypto and that project. This Bitcoin is completely different. Not only,
Yes.
and this is also worth this the target audience for this podcast is not people that have spent 10,000 hours in Bitcoin. We're trying to reach new people and to educate people and start from the very beginning. So I think it's worthwhile explaining these things, even though to us it might be simple because we've talked about it a
Yeah.
million times. If you think
It's
about
it's rudimentary.
please go ahead.
And for it's rudimentary for us, but you're exactly right. The hope here is that we can reach a business community that maybe isn't so familiar with these ideas that needs some
Yes,
education and then some eventual handholding. And
exactly.
I there's an ebook we put together, and you can go to the website and get it. You just need to put your email address in. You can have it. It's about 80 pages. I read through it yesterday. It's a quick read. It's 80 internet pages, which is in big font. So, and there's some charts in there, so you can get through it pretty quickly. And I would encourage anyone that's listening that hears us talking about these concepts that maybe isn't completely familiar with Bitcoin, but wants to learn more. That ebook really distills down a lot of these concepts.
Mm,
And as I said, these are rudimentary ideas to us that seem like second nature. The reason Daniel founded this company, the reason I'm leaving my job to come do this because these are the bedrock ideas that underlie this money that is Bitcoin. And in the ebook, it's really simply put together. It's distilled a lot of ideas and thoughts of some of the great people in this space that have done really deep dives into maybe the economics part of it, maybe the money part of it, maybe the capital part of it, the stock to flow, as Daniel talked about earlier. And that's all distilled down into some super understandable, bite sized um, sections within the book that hopefully will spur even more desire to understand and to educate and to learn. So
That's brilliant.
just want
I
to give a
appreciate
shill.
you bringing that up. Definitely a
Yeah,
good resource for beginners, and it's good for us to be reminded that we have to kind of pull things a little bit apart and to make sense of what I was trying to say before is if you understand that Bitcoin is not a company, it's not a political organization, it's not even a DAO, a decentralized organization. It is literally a protocol and software that was released to the world, and it is being kept alive by people running the Bitcoin software all over the world. It is like a public form of infrastructure. And so when we talk about it in this way, and I do honestly, you could say I am working for Bitcoin, but it's in my own self-interest to do so because if I am spreading awareness about Bitcoin and the more economic energy goes into the Bitcoin network, I benefit, you benefit, some person on the other side of the planet benefits. There is no zero sum game involved. It is all, we're all pulling in the same direction.
it's interesting. You kind of just spurred this thought in my head where it's we're all working for money, trying to get money, but we're also working for Bitcoin, but for
It's
not only to
brilliant.
get the Bitcoin, but for the network. We're working for, in English translation, on behalf of, as
Yes,
well as to receive. Like it's both definitions of for.
it's
Sorry, that
brilliant.
kind of just popped in my head
That
randomly.
is brilliant. I'm loving this discussion, Brandon. This is what we need. This is what people need to hear because you have to change your mental model when you approach Bitcoin. And I think a lot of the, maybe this is where we could kind of take this. I think that is worthwhile because when people approach Bitcoin coming from their traditional perspective looking at the world, it does not make a lot of sense. You are right to think, well, it consumes a lot of energy. Well, nobody controls it. Isn't that a bad thing? The government isn't backing it. Isn't that a bad thing? But once you truly
Who's
understand
the
these
guy who
things,
started it? Oh no, yeah,
it's the whole point of it. All of the things I just mentioned are features, not bugs. We want it to
yep.
consume more energy. We want it to be completely outside of anybody's control. And maybe you want to speak a little bit to about that, about changing your mental models and kind of understanding that.
Man, I did a podcast a couple weeks ago with Daniel Prince,
Uh-huh.
Once Bitten podcast, who was actually a very influential figure in my life, and was an honor to get to speak with him and be on his show. But the humbling that Bitcoin gave to me, like I promise, if
Mm,
you knew me a decade ago, if yeah, my even my family, I wasn't the same person. I wasn't some crazy douchebag or anything like that, but I was definitely my ideas are right. I know the way to look at the world. You
right.
guys are all crazy, and it really just took a lot of humbling of myself to be like, wow, you
Mm,
were wrong about so much of this stuff. There was so much you didn't understand. And that really started with Bitcoin. Actually, I'm going to even go back. It really started for me with food. I had all sorts
mm,
of asthma. I've told you, you and I have talked about this before, so I won't spend too much time. But I had all sorts of, quote unquote, chronic health issues, asthma, allergies, eczema, all this stuff. And it was because of my diet. And I ended up going down the food rabbit hole and just being like, oh my gosh, red meat's actually good for me. Oh, I vegetables are fine, but they're not that great. Oh, eggs are about the second best thing you can eat
Yeah.
behind red meat. And all this stuff I was told my life, my whole life, and I would do crazy workouts just to try to keep my weight in line and just to try to stay somewhat fit. And I
Mm,
didn't realize it was all because of my diet. And that that started kind of the, hey, you're probably, if you're wrong about this thing, there's probably some other things that are wrong
yeah.
in your life. And then I got to Bitcoin and it was like, oh, there's more than just a few things you're wrong about. There's 800 things you're wrong about. And
Yeah.
there's just something so difficult for humans, and everyone talks about number go up. It's the most important thing. It's going to get people in, and that's true to an extent. The financial incentives of, hey, look, this thing's going up. You want to get in on it because you want to protect your purchasing power into the future, and that is a
Yeah.
huge element. But there is another element we're battling here, which is people's ego and people's anchoring in their head. There are people who you could tell them you're going to get debased, your money is going to be worth less, but you have to accept that you were wrong about these things and you need to change your worldview, and they won't do it.
No.
They will not change. They cannot accept that certain parts of uh, their life are just a total lie, and it's hard. It sucks. Going through those
Yeah.
things. A lot of the stuff I've dealt with. Just looking, I talked about this with Daniel Prince as well about World War II. I've never been so wrong about something. I've never been more propagandized. I just it's all just completely wrong about all of it. And to have to come accept that is, I love Jack Mallers when he says Bitcoin is an ego test. It
Mm,
100% is an ego test.
yeah,
And
I agree.
we're going to have a lot of problems. Bitcoin could go to $2 million tomorrow, and there's still people that are not going to adopt a better form of money because it breaks their mental model of the world. It breaks what they quote unquote know to be true, and we're never going to get through to those people. And that is the hardest part of coming around to Bitcoin. It's not even figuring out the money part of it's easy. That's read a few books, listen to a few things. I mean, honestly, if you
Mm,
read the Bitcoin Standard and don't understand the monetary aspect, like, I'm sorry, like, you
I
should be
agree.
relegated to some sort of society where it's like you just deserve to be left behind. Like, sorry, if you don't get this, like, it's very obvious, it's very clear, and I really do think the people that see that and still won't come along are just the ones that cannot humble themselves. They just cannot bring themselves to just break their worldview. And I don't know what that is. I don't know why that's instilled in us in humans. Maybe it's some sort of survival instinct from the past or
Right.
something. But it's just really frustrating. But at the same time, it's again, back to working for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is self-selecting the best people in society, the ones that can humble themselves, the ones that can understand the monetary aspect, and saying, you perpetuate my existence. So
That's brilliant. It is equally frustrating, but also fascinating. I think that's why
it
Bitcoiners,
is. It truly is.
yeah, if you spend time on what we call Bitcoin Twitter, you will see average people turn into pseudo philosophers and psychologists because you literally are driven mad by the fact that you don't understand why people cannot understand. It is so funny. There is a lot of overlap between Bitcoin and spirituality and religion, in my opinion, once you kind of see the light, you want to tell it to everybody. You want to, why don't people listen? And then eventually, like you said, you start easing off. You don't talk to it about to everybody. I know there's something in, I don't remember what the name of it was, but when somebody's convinced of something and you try to convince them otherwise, they actually, well, we all understand this intuitively, but it actually reinforces them to lean more into what they were already thinking. And
Yeah,
with Bitcoin, it's just I think it's twofold. One, everything you thought you knew about the world is pretty much wrong, and everything you've
pretty
ever
much.
heard about Bitcoin is also wrong. So you first have to, it is all about humility. You have to capitulate and say, I actually did not understand how the world worked. And then after that, you have to say, Bloomberg was wrong, Forbes was wrong, um, all of these people that I've listened to, Dave Ramsey was wrong, all of them were wrong about Bitcoin. and
Yeah.
and and accepting that is very difficult for people, and I hope this is not to speak bad about beginners. We want you to understand, we want to help you with this, but it is, the writing's on the wall, right?
We do, and I mean, I can't tell you how profound a life change it has been. And your talk of bringing it back to a spirituality. I was raised in a Christian home, raised
Mhm.
by Christian parents, and I still went to church. I still, went through the motions and did all this stuff as an adult, but nowhere, I didn't really have that personal relationship
Hmm.
with Christ, with God that I have. So Bitcoin really brought me back to that, of
Interesting.
it, just saying, "Hey, there's so much more to life. What are you focusing on? Like this
Right.
consumerism, this rat race, this, what's important in your life?" And it really helped me reframe my view of my faith, and just brought me back and the changes. And I'm not saying everyone has to, come back to some faith or something like that, but
Hmm.
it's it's level set me and brought me back to a place that I look back at myself 7, 8, 10 years ago, and I don't even recognize that person. It's, man, I was missing out on. I just wasted, a decade, 2 decades of my life doing what? Not doing things that are important. That there's so much more to this world than just consumption and consumerism. There's a spiritual realm to this world, and I'm sorry, even if you're not a person of faith or whatever, to deny that there's a spiritual realm to this world, that there are things we
Yes.
beyond our understanding, that there's energies and emotions and stuff out there that we just don't have all the answers to. I don't know, but I was living that. I was just, go to the next event, go to the next dinner, go to
Yep.
the, go to your nine to
So
five
many
every
people
day,
can
check
relate
the
to that.
stocks, do that. And until you step out of it, you don't realize how dreary it is. And my daily prayers, I am Protestant, but I have like the Catholic guilt of all just living my life so pointlessly
Hmm.
and worthlessly for so. I just, constantly asking forgiveness for just wasting so much time.
I I am sitting here thinking we gotta do a spin-off of this where we can dive off the deep end into these topics, because I think honestly this is the most fascinating part of Bitcoin to me. I'm a businessman, I do like that, but this is the real meat, and I'm gonna try to segue this back because Bitcoin changes people. You don't change Bitcoin, it changes you. And I want to bring this back to the business, but I'm gonna try to do a segue here. We're gonna see if I can do this.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of derailed us. That
No, no,
was my
this
fault.
is perfect. I love this discussion, and I hope other people will appreciate it as well. My point is, the fiat system, and when we say fiat, we mean the corruption of money through government and central banking and the appropriation and the fraud of money creation. The fiat currency that has now decoupled us from reality, and we're living in some fantasy world, it has disenfranchised people all over the world from the true meaning of life. And if you actually look, you go to 1971.com, I think it's on there, that chart, you'll see before 1971 when Richard Nixon went off the gold standard, back when we were actually still at least somehow tethered to the real world, there were polls run on what, I'm sure there still is, what means the most to you in the world, what's your biggest goals. And it used to be find meaning in life, start a family, travel, become closer to God. After the debasement of money and the debasement of morals and everything, it completely, you had a hockey stick the other way of now money is the most important thing, my career is the most important thing, getting a big house, a nice car. I believe the reason for that is once you feel like you're in the rat race and you're on that treadmill, you no longer can afford the luxury of pursuing the higher things in life. And now you have to dedicate your time to just amassing as much wealth as possible because you never feel secure. Now, my segue into business. We've talked a lot about Bitcoin now and inflation and the problems plaguing businesses. When we as individuals adopt Bitcoin, we change our time preference, we look into the future, we do more meaningful things. Do you think that's also the case for businesses, that they might start changing the way they think about doing business, the way they develop their products, and a psychological change in the way you do business?
So I 100% believe this, and I know Safe has talked a lot about this. There's differing schools of thought. I would say I'm on his school of thought where we're really going to start getting back to equity funded businesses, and
Yes.
Bitcoin is the perfect equity. And there's a whole separate rabbit hole we won't get into here, but basically, a lot of the impetus for the Federal Reserve and the desire of the central bankers to bring back, or not bring back, but create a central bank for the United States
Yeah.
was the fact that at the end of the 19th century, that a lot of businesses were getting funded with equity and
Yes.
savings, and they weren't having that. They wanted it funded with debt. And I can't tell you in my line of work, almost every single capital project, undertaking, investment, it's all funded with debt. It's all, hey, we need a new, we're going to need a new printing press in 2 years from now. Let's start lining up the financing options. It's like, what?
Mm,
How is no one able to fund anything on their own? Even stuff like credit facilities where you're lending against receivables or you're lending against inventory or what. I mean, how is it that no one is able to fund a working capital cycle, fund their own
mm,
business out debt? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, when you
it
step
is.
back of it, and it's hard when you're in it. It's hard when you're living it. It's like, what do you mean? This is the way the world
Yeah.
works. You need it so
Yeah.
you can run a business because it takes 60 days to make something. You have to buy the inventory. Who could hold money for 60 days and invest it in something and then be able to wait until your product's delivered? You need that money now. And for that pleasure, you get to pay us the prevailing prime rate plus whatever. I mean, what when you actually step out and realize how insane it is that no one's actually able to run a business on their own capital, that they have to get outside capital to run it, it's nuts. Like that is
Yeah.
not the way things should be functioning. And a
No.
huge part of why I stepped into Sovereign is I want to be able to get to businesses, talk to them as someone who has lived through that world, who has done financial planning, who has done financing for these companies, who has done, what we call in the industry CapEx, capital expenditures, figured out how to price that stuff out, how to finance it, what makes more sense. I want to be able to sit down in a company and go, what if we financed it? And by finance, I
Mm.
mean used our savings, aka retained earnings, via something that's called Bitcoin to fund your future purchases to get you off. I mean, you think we're on the hamster wheel going to our 9 to 5 or whatever. How many of these businesses are on the hamster wheel just to pay the interest
Right.
on their debt because they need to,
Yes.
they're constantly borrowing against their assets to fund the whole organization. They cannot sustain themselves without this ever ballooning facility of credit to keep the business running. Like, what if we were
Yeah.
able to get you off that hamster wheel, business owner? And
Wow.
it's not going to be today. It's not going to be next year. It's not going to be in 2 years, but 5 years, 10 years down the road. Can we get you self sufficient where you never have to call a bank again, where you never have to say, hey, so and so, come fund me, and for the pleasure, I get to pay you 7%? I mean, I would love to get out to these businesses, show them that that possibility exists because, yeah, we're all debt slaves individually. We have a mortgage, we have a credit card, we have, a utility bill, whatever it is. W- Businesses have the same problem. They all,
Right.
for the most part, not all of them, but for the most part, they
Yep.
owe someone money and they're constantly churning out. Now they have to give a percentage of their energy, and to pay someone else for the luxury of using money, and they should be able to use their own money. And I think that opportunity, I think that future exists. I think we will get there as Bitcoin continues to be the barometer against which all things are measured in terms of financial performance. But the sooner we can start getting companies on that trajectory, and it's one of those things where I don't necessarily foresee something where it's 8 months from now, oh, thank you, you changed my life. It's
Mm.
you 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like I said, holy cow, you've completely reframed my business. You've completely changed the trajectory of this company. We're self sustaining now. We're way more cautious with what we're spending. And that's another thing, too, about borrowing on these giant credit facilities, the amount of profligate spending of just not watching your bottom line because you're like, I have access to credit. I have money that's not mine, and whatever the interest will be due every month, and then I'll figure out how I'll pay the principal back. The amount of people that get into this cascading mountain of we can just spend on this, we'll pay it back in 12 months, in 24 months, whatever. It creates a psychological deviation from sound business practices, and not everyone does it, and some people are disciplined enough to use uh, debt appropriately, to finance their company
Sure.
appropriately. But a lot of people are distracted by this and don't actually think of the opportunity cost that Bitcoin will instill. Like, do I really want to part with this asset for 5 years on this piece of machinery? Is it going to, am I actually going to be profitable in sats, in Bitcoin
Yeah.
terms?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or or should I maybe hold off on that? Maybe that's not the best thing. And it just completely reframes the way business owners will be running their business and be making decisions about expenses and hirings, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yeah. Man, that was absolutely brilliant, Brandon. I really appreciated that, and I could not imagine listening to that little rant and not having been aware of this before, because that would absolutely blow my mind. There's so much to unpack there. I think first I want to give a little bit context to it's not this might just be my opinion and maybe you'll completely disagree with me. I'm happy to debate that. I think having gone through zero interest rate policies, it's not just a an option to take on debt. It's been a necessity to survive in a lot of industries. You have to grow, you have to get big. It doesn't even matter if you're profitable. You just borrow and you just keep growing. And the larger you get, the more capital you have access to, the better terms and whatnot. And in my opinion, this, well, it's not my my idea, but I do think it's true that this has crushed a lot of small businesses that cannot compete with these giant corporations loaning money at 0, 1, 2% and just continually expanding. So you have to utilize the debt because of the inflationary fiat system we're living in. And then the second thing is with inflation being so high, and I'd argue the best alternative investment for a business would be treasury bills, 5 year, 10 year. But once you truly understand that inflation is not CPI, but it's the expansion of the money supply, you realize that pretty much all bonds have negative real yields. So it makes sense to think, well, why would I keep cash around? Why would I buy T-bills? Why would I do mergers and acquisitions? Why would I do stock buybacks? It's all dilutive. Bitcoin is a commodity with the highest rate of return in the world, and this completely changes the way we think about business. It's a new kind of hurdle rate, and you touch on that as well. Now you have to consider, well, buying my stock back or buying another company or distributing dividends, or even starting a new product line or a new subsidiary or a strategic business unit, is that going to outperform the quote unquote risk-free rate of Bitcoin, which is somewhere around 20, 30% based on certain people's projections? This completely changes the way we think about this. And now you're not thinking, well, what's going to happen the next quarter? How are we going to meet these financial deadlines and these interests? Now we can start, well, I actually have 10 Bitcoin on my balance sheet. It's going up 30% a year. I'm using that to finance CapEx. So now at the board meetings, we're thinking 5 years ahead. We're thinking 10 years ahead instead of just thinking 3 months. I don't know if you agree with that or have some thoughts on that.
No, I couldn't agree more. And this was so prevalent in commercial real estate. To your point, you had these giant
Mm,
companies, you had these big developers that were just, we got to build something. And it's like,
yeah,
well, is there even a demand for this? And then as interest
doesn't
rates
matter.
went up, they get to is the project's dead. There's
Yeah,
no, it's not profitable anymore. So now you can't raise any equity because it's just a write-off to all the equity holders. It's just not, it's not worth our time anymore. It's not worth finishing this project. It just take the loss and move on. And it was all because money was free. And then it got a little more expensive. And you just completely flipped the economics on its head. And now you just have these, you know, vacant lots or half-built buildings or whatever. And they're coming back saying, can you give us more debt? And more debt? Are you nuts? I mean, so it's not just a the big guys get all this stuff, and we could spend forever talking about business cycles and Austrian theory and
sure.
Keynesianism and all lunacy that's taught in our universities and everything. But at the end of the day, when the music stops on this, you have this extraordinary amount of misallocated capital because no one had to do any sort of economic opportunity costs in their head because they were just big, the money was there. And guess what they did with a lot of that money they borrowed? Oh, that went to member distributions. And a lot of people got paid from money they didn't actually produce anything of value, or I shouldn't even say anything of value. There's some value to a half-built building,
Sure.
but nothing people wanted. You made something that no one wanted, and or people wanted, but at a different price point. And you you now have taken a lot of the capital out of the project for yourself, and you didn't do anything with it. And it's endless the amount of things, and I'm like I said, I'm using real estate as an example here just because it's so crystal clear. It's
Yeah.
so obvious. These issues are perfectly encapsulated in a large real estate developer getting free money. And we don't need to rehash 2008. Everyone saw what that looked like on the residential side. It's happening more on the commercial side now. And I would have conversations with these people going, "What's the plan?" And they go, "Well, we're just going to wait till they lower rates." Like a
It's
a
crazy.
a business plan. Your way out of this situation is just waiting till they lower rates. I mean, what kind of operation runs like that?
Just yeah.
Where your determination of the outcome of a project is based on 12 guys sitting in a building in Washington, D.C.
That's what I was
I
just
mean,
gonna say.
that's not a project. That's
The
building a
world
system.
economy, people are sitting around waiting for a bunch of old white dudes to set the price of money. That is
Yeah,
why we are living in a fantasy world. This is not real life.
there's a few ladies but involved, but
Are
yeah,
there that? Okay, I might be wrong on that. It does look like an old boys club from the outside.
it might be actually. I actually don't know, but yeah,
Yeah, but is it so hard to imagine a free market where the interest rate is actually set by what is actually happening in the economy and not what some bureaucrats think? And
right.
would we
But
have a more fair view of what the world looks like in that scenario?
yeah, it's crazy to me that well, and then savings has been demonized, and the
Yeah.
amount of people I talk to in my industry that were consumer spending is going down. That's when everything craters. Like that is true. That is how recessions happen. But what like step back from the statement you just made
Yeah.
and ask yourself, what the hell kind of world are you living in? Where we just have to be buying crap to I mean we got to be going to Walmart, we got to be going to uh, Best Buy, just getting junk to sort of not have a recession,
It
to
sounds
not
utterly ridiculous when you actually say it out loud.
when it what's crazy is it's true and it makes sense in your head and it's kind of like, all right, moving on to the next thing. But when you step back from that statement and look at the actual meaning of it, it's total and utter madness.
Yes. I absolutely love that you brought that up and you I
Excuse me.
that was very that I love the way you described that because the idea that the health of an economy is determined by its aggregate spending, is it people spending it does me buying a pizza, is that what is producing value in economy, or is it the actual production of the pizza? It should be the production of goods and services that is the thing of value. Me consuming those
Marijuana.
things, what does that do anything except keep the this zombie economy on life support? That's really what it does. And it forces oh, there's so many different ways I could take this. I might just end up going off the deep end. I'm just thinking about all the crazy
Dump.
things
Take
that
the
we
dump.
have to
Take the
do. Please go ahead. I'm gonna go off on a
No, I was
tangent.
gonna say I just combined jump and dive into one word and came up with dump. So, but I've had conversations with people in my former line of work where I told them, I said, I don't have any scientific data to back this up. I don't have numbers. I don't have trade publications.
Yep.
This is just total intuition, total observation. I think somewhere between 50 to 70% of businesses shouldn't exist. It
Mm,
shouldn't exist. They're just
fascinating.
making nonsense that people are buying with credit money and in an actual economy where we had true economic signal as to what should be being built and what actually is demanded. none of these people would exist. And it's, oh, well, then you're gonna have, all these people are gonna be out of jobs and they're not gonna be, no, we are going to reappropriate people to doing stuff that uh, society is actually demanding, that savers are actually
Yes.
wanting. So we will redirect productivity away from junk, away from nonsense, back to things people actually want. A number one, and B number two. And Jeff Booth has done such a better job of explaining this than I ever will. But you are having this economy that's just being perpetuated by doing
Yes.
stuff, by jobs, by all this thing. And it's
Yeah.
because the money is expanding, control is centralizing, and you have to have the hamster wheel to fund, not to fund, to fuel
To
basically
perpetuate
all
that
of,
system.
yes, exactly, to just keep perpetuating it. And the whole system is a total fraud, a total fraud that's not based in profitability, that's not based in productivity, that's not based in actual consumer uh,
Yes.
consumer choice. And I mean, how many people are just buying stuff because it's there, but don't actually need it, don't actually want it, and that's not a positive for society. That's a detraction of value because money was
Yes.
borrowed at a cheap rate to that your savings was debased at to fund something that someone wouldn't want under normal circumstances. And that that idea is really hard for people. I still don't I get it and I understand it, but I still don't really understand the true ramifications of that. But what
No,
I do know
it's immense.
is it's all because we don't have real money. We have totally fake money, and a lot of businesses are making things that people don't want, people don't need because they are, and what the worst part is, it's not the business owner's fault. They
No.
aren't getting an accurate economic signal because all this fake money has been poured into society. So their signal is people do want this. People actually want to buy this, but they may not. But you don't know as a business owner, so you're just responding to where the money is coming from. But it's at the cost of savers and investors, and everything is completely distorted, and it's unfair to business owners. And fortunately now we have something in Bitcoin where business owners can start to take back some of the economic signal and
Yes.
start using their unit of account as Bitcoin and measuring things against that and saying, okay, what is the economic signal here? Am I actually profitable in my productivity cycles measured in a real currency as opposed to
Mm,
this dollar currency where a lot of times I'm borrowing to cover cash shortfalls, or I'm borrowing to fund a project that I don't know if it's going to actually be profitable in terms of a real unit of account into the future. And it's going to be hard, and we're not going to get there, day one or in a 4 hour session with these business owners. But I really hope in the long term what we can do here at Sovereign is start them down this path where they start to recognize economic reality and start to recognize their opportunity costs on their own time, on their own lived experience of working in the business, and just completely change their outlook on business. And to bring in running a business is hard. I'm not talking about Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, who it doesn't affect them. I'm talking about real business owners, real
yeah.
people that are part of the production process, part of the sales team, part of payroll, part of managing vendors that are, getting their hands, uh, maybe not literally dirty, but metaphorically dirty
Right,
in
right.
running the business. And it is hard, and it's those people, I'm really hoping to be able to bring some joy back into, not that the work will ever be easy, or not that working's supposed to be some joyride, but they'll actually start to be able to see the productivity in what they're building, and what they're creating, and actually, as opposed to just, I gotta keep the lights on, I gotta keep the
Yeah,
people employed, I gotta keep the machines running so I can make my next interest payment, so I can make my next electricity bill payment, so I can make my next mortgage payment, and
exactly.
get back to really finding value in your craft, and what you're doing and what you're making, and providing something that people value. So
I absolutely love that. I hope Bitcoin can be a foundation for people to feel more secure, look out into the future, and escape that whole hamster wheel you were talking about. And it is important. We are not. I mean, if Jeff wants to come talk to us, I mean, my phone is open. But we want to help normal businesses, not the ones that are benefiting from this system, because Amazon, they're in the S&P 500. The S&P 500 has become the pseudo savings account of Americans, because where else are you gonna put your money? And so they're
because
just
the
getting
S&P
constant.
500 becomes a
What?
cantillionaires club, where it's basically
Exactly.
the successful businesses, ones with that are closest to the money printer. And so people, to avoid debasement, then have
Yeah.
to save their money, quote unquote, in these companies that are closest to the money printer, and then get the privilege, at least in our country, in the United States, of being taxed 15% when you go try to access your savings. So,
It's ridiculous. And let's not forget that the reason that we even have to put our money in the S&P 500 is because of the debasement of the currency. And I think it's worthwhile to compare things, because if any government had, if that their financials were mine, you would say this guy is completely screwed. Like what is going on? He just keeps borrowing to pay back what he borrowed. You'd say that's insane. If we looked at it as a company, a lot of the companies in the S&P 500 are by definition zombie companies. The Magnificent Seven are holding up uh, the entire S&P 500. So it, the government debases the currency. We have to invest our money in equities to try to keep the value. All of that money goes to the top companies, which then hurts the small businesses. And this just it just seems utterly ridiculous. And then we get into the 2020 crisis. What's the solution? Let's just make a bunch of money, a bunch of loans, and print a bunch of money, and just give people stimulus checks to go out and just spend money with zombie companies. So now you have a zombie economy with zombie comp. This this seems completely and utterly ridiculous. And I'll end it with this. I'm not an American. I'm from Denmark, but the founding fathers, I know enough to know that the founding fathers of the United States understood that usury and messing with the money was actually a law. It was punishable by death, because they understood that when you manipulate they understood this thousands of years ago. When you manipulate currency, you create all of these cascading effects, which inevitably leads to hyperinflation, and it ruins society. Now, hundreds of years later, the politicians are just handing out free money, and just we're living in a complete lunatic world, if you ask me personally.
yeah, I mean, Parker Lewis has talked about this at length, but the one thing the founding fathers got wrong was they never envisioned a total loss of control of the money. And
Mm.
basically, every single thing they built, all the guardrails, everything they set up, the entire system. And yes, we have still had some decent functionality of a system, and have kind of had free speech protected and gun rights protected, and there
Yeah.
there have been some guardrails. But at the end of the day, it really all can be circumvented by the ability to make money out of thin air. And the founding fathers, they didn't even what's so crazy is like you said, they knew. I mean, they knew control of the money will destroy a society, manipulating currency will destroy a society, but they could never fathom something like the Federal Reserve, like this giant bureaucracy that has become, the relationship between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, which, is neither federal nor a reserve, but certainly has very close ties to government. It's a pseudo amorphous blob of government and not government interests. Um, they didn't foresee that having control of the money would be so destructive, or excuse me, they knew it would be destructive. They didn't know how it would get
Right.
done.
I do think from what I understand that they did see the trouble that the Bank of England and the central banks in Europe
Yes.
had caused, and they did try to avoid it. And for a very long time, Americans fought to not have a central bank because what the Federal Reserve is, truthfully, it's a banking cartel. The Federal Reserve was created in secrecy, and this is the whole rabbit hole we probably should avoid. I went into this with Ed Giron, but at the end of the day, it is a completely unholy alliance of having the government in bed with Elon Musk just said it. They have 14
But it's
magic money printers just printing away money, just sending out payments.
who
It's
knew?
crazy.
I'm, I'm surprised it's that few. But
Yes.
I mean, what, I mean, yes, okay, go down the rabbit hole of history and Andrew Jackson and the central bank, the Federal Reserve, but you're touching on something that is really back in the day, people understood the corruption of money, and that
Yes.
is why there was populist support. That's why Andrew Jackson was able to fight the central banks because the people were not standing for it. They didn't want it. They
Yes.
didn't want to enrich the I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name who was basically Andrew Jackson's arch enemy at the central bank of the U.S. or it was like Bank of the United States or something
Sorry,
it
I
was
can't
called. I
help you
forget
there.
now. But anyways, society was educated about this. People were
Very
educated.
good
They
point.
knew the perversion of money. They didn't want a central bank because when money could be created out of thin air, they knew the consequence.
Yes.
We as a society have grown up in, K through 8, me included, high school, college. You don't learn any of this stuff.
No.
You're specifically made to not understand this. It's made complex. It's very confusing on purpose. And the inability to understand what happens when you corrupt money sort of undergirds the entire lack of adoption of Bitcoin is that the problem is fundamentally not even understood at just the most base level by 90% of society. And back, in the 19th century, I would say it was reverse. I would say 90% of society
Yes.
knew the problems of currency manipulation and not having money backed
Exactly.
by actual commodities. And that, part of the education part of what we're going to be doing at Sovereign is to start raising that awareness. And obviously, every Bitcoiner is out there trying to raise awareness about it, but it's not just some rabbit hole, it's a fundamental shift in society's understanding of what money actually is, what it means to have 14 magic money printers, and why it's so detrimental to our economy, to productivity, and just society in general. So,
That was very well said. None of what Bitcoiners and what we're talking about is fringe or our opinion or some crazy new thing. This is just the lessons of history. The history of the human race is the history of economic booms and busts, and civilizations rise and fall with their money. And I do 100% agree with you that people appreciated this in the past. And this is where I my tinfoil hat comes on, and I'll just leave it at that. The very people that have done all this are also the ones that educate us. And I would find it very odd if they had educated us on their own scam. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think there's a bunch of people in in shadowy hoodies sitting around being all evil, but I don't think it's a coincidence that we've lost touch with
Sure, I'll
reality.
spoil I don't
Man,
know. I mean, I mean, the public school rabbit hole that there is. I mean,
oh boy.
we were founded after what went on in Prussia and Germany, and it was,
Yes.
not to get too crazy or anything, but it was basically a state indoctrination program. I mean, that
That is
is the
exactly what it
foundation.
is.
Go back and look at our documents. It's not some outlandish conspiracy theory or anything. I mean, that's
No,
how the
it's
public
not.
school systems were drawn up, was to basically educate the masses in what the state thought was important. And you could argue maybe at the time the state had some noble aspirations. I would probably disagree with you. However, you could at least say there were good intentions behind it. We need to get our population educated about what we think is important. And there are people who legitimately believe that centralized control is important to a functioning society. And so,
Yeah.
of course they're going to go in and educate people to be have a greater proclivity towards this system of centralized control. I don't think there's anything
It there is
crazy
no
about that.
conspiracy here, and I think
Yeah,
Seyfedin Moose has done a great job of explaining this because after John Maynard Keynes came on and basically said, "Well, hey, government, I have a theory where you get all the power in the entire world and nobody can ever say anything. How do you like that
right.
idea?" Well, that went over
Yeah,
pretty well, and so Austrian economists or Austrian economics is now seen as some fringe thing. Austrian economics is just true economics. It's just how it actually works. And the professors and the thought leaders back then were ostracized. They were mocked and they were run through the streets and humiliated. This was not a coincidence, and it's not to get into the conspiracy, but it is the proof is in the pudding. We had a complete change of values and education, and it's we've now 100 years later it's we're so far off the deep end that we have to have a podcast and talk to people about, well, sound money is actually a good idea, you know.
it was an ostracization, I guess you could say. So
Wow, there we go.
we'll joke. Yeah.
Man, listen, Brandon, we've been going for almost an hour and 20 minutes. I think this was absolutely phenomenal. I do think it's a good idea to start wrapping it up, even though you and I could probably keep going. If you have some closing remarks, anything you want to say, now is the time to do it.
Yeah, so I would just say I'm super excited to step in this role. Daniel and I had some frank, no another terrible joke, no pun intended, conversations um, at the beginning of this, and listen, I'm not sure where this is going. I think we're following the signal. I personally, I mean, this is my skill set. This is uh, what I'm best at. I lack a
Yes.
lot of other skills, but getting into businesses, talking with them, educating them, getting them onto a better money, that this really is where my skill set is. And, I'm not sure how this is all going to turn out, but I'm super excited about this. I think the opportunity's there. I think we have something special here, and I hope we're not the only one of these companies. I hope 10 more sovereigns pop up. This is not meant to be some sort of cutthroat competition with everyone out there to get into
No.
businesses. I want this to be a blueprint for many other companies. There's Bridge to Bitcoin in the UK, I know. So, let's
Mm,
start building more of these, get out there. I think the opportunity is incredible. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think now is a good time to jump into getting into businesses, helping them, get on the path to financial sanity. And um, I would just really encourage people to come check out the website. It's Sovereign without the first E, SOVREIGN. We
.io.
have a ton of resources up on there. The ebook is a 10 out of 10. A lot of work went into it. It's very well done. We offer some courses as well. We offer, the ability to just reach out to us if you have questions, if you're even if you're say, hey, I have someone I've been talking to about this. I don't feel comfortable doing it. I would feel way better with some
Mm,
professional doing it. We have some, referral program options where if we can get something done with some of these businesses and get in there, you can get a percentage of it as well. So there's some financial incentive for you as well as sort of the altruism that all of us Bitcoiners kind of operate under. And I would just encourage people to come check out the website, click around, look around, meet us, meet everyone on there. We have some bios of the people doing this, and just reach out to any of us. We have contact info on
absolutely.
there. Let Daniel give his information. I'm on Noster at Libby Anon, and I'll be running the Sovereign account on there as well, trying to get some more uh, visibility. And I just want to interact with people. I want to interact with people on the ground. A lot of plebes have interaction with businesses, and a lot of us. I'm an extrovert, but a lot of us in the Bitcoin space are introverts, and it may not be comfortable.
Mm,
So if feel free to please reach out, and I would encourage, and I want feedback too, as well. We're not going to do everything perfectly. We're going to make some bad decisions. We're going to make some mistakes, and we'll be as open and honest as we can about that. But tell us, give us feedback. Let us know if you have an interaction with us, if you're hearing something out there, just please just tell us. Say, hey, this is a concern. You're not doing this well. We're learning too, and
absolutely.
we're super excited about it, but we're beginning a journey on our own as well. So
A hundred
those would
percent.
be my closing remarks, and I'll throw it back to you, Daniel, for some other.
That was great. I'm just gonna wrap up what you said. We are a in a very informal way to say it, we are a collective of Bitcoin enthusiasts. We've collectively spent tens of thousands of hours understanding this, and we want to give that back to the world. We want to help people understand this. And on a personal level, I am happy that you are now on Team Bitcoin and working on this because I think the world needs to hear what you have to say. I think this was a fascinating chat. And I think I'll leave it with two things to touch on what you say. One, the fiat system and the struggles we've talked about are not going to get better. This is not I honestly wish it was, but things are not going to get better on their own. The fiat experiment, it doesn't end well. And two, lots of room. You can always hop in, but get in now. Start understanding this. Things are not going to get better on their own. As a matter of fact, it usually just gets worse and worse, exponentially faster. So, man, this was such a great talk. Any last words, Brandon, before we close?
Well, just you want to let people know where they might be able to find you, and Simon.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I am on X at Daniel_Frank1, I believe it is. I'm on LinkedIn as well, post some stuff there. Yeah. But other
I'm
than that, follow Sovereign, go in and check out what we're doing.
Yep. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well. As I
Yep.
told Prince, if you like Facebook for business, come find me on LinkedIn. So, um,
Oh, there you go. Excellent. Well, I hope this is going to be the first of many. I look forward to. I think we need to shoot another episode together because this was really great and we have a lot more to discuss. So, a
yeah, we
lot of conversations to be had.
awesome.
This was
Well,
perfect.
appreciate your time,
Well,
Daniel, and appreciate you putting this together. I'm super excited here. I couldn't be more bullish, and looking forward to the future here.
likewise, extremely excited about this and happy to have you, Brandon. Thank you so much for doing this and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Absolutely. You too.